Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to episode 13 of Game Retail Ramblings. I'm your host, Travis Severance, coming to you live from It Feels Like Springtime in Tatooine, Rochester, New York, home of Millennium Games, the largest game store in the Milky Way. I wanted to do a big shout out to everybody who liked and subscribed last time. We are up to 540 some odd subs, which means that we're slowly trekking towards monetization, which is great. I know I've got a couple more hours worth of viewing that I need to get to cross those thresholds. So thanks to everybody who stopped by and clicked the button and done the thing. When I started this thing a couple of months ago, I had no idea how many people would want to actually follow or pay attention or listen to what I had to say about game store stuff. It's been super encouraging. You're dedicating 30 minutes of your life to listen to what I have to say about whatever the topic du jour ends up being, and it's humbling to see all the positive response and the engagement that I've seen. I had no idea going off into this path and this journey what this was going to become, but big shout out and big thank you to all those people that do stop in and ask questions or have opinions about what I'm talking about. And we'll keep going and keep producing content as long as you keep showing up to the videos and interacting with me. And today we're going to talk about Star Wars in general, in a broad space, the products that are on the marketplace here today, go into a little bit of my Star Wars journey. So I was 15 months old when Empire Strikes Back came out, so I didn't go to the theater. I might have been dragged to a drive-in or something like that to see it. It was pretty popular, but I did get to see Return of the Jedi, and I was about 4 years old at that time. I would definitely say that Star Wars has been a large part of my geek fandom for the time, for as long as I can remember. I remember going to the movie at that age and seeing things on the screen, and I'm familiar with the stuff that was going on in Endor, so it brings back really fond memories.
Oh my goodness.
I put myself through 26-ish hours of tattoos and stuff. So yeah, we're in the weeds pretty good on this thing. When I was a freshman in college, episode 1 came out, so my girlfriend at the time got us tickets, and we promptly went out to see that and promptly went to the bar directly after because it wasn't quite the cinematic experience that I was hoping for there. Jar Jar was a little bit much for me, and I didn't love the CGI that they did in the new film and stuff. So as years have gone by, I certainly enjoy the pod racing and some of the other acting that happened during that movie. But in general, it just was not the movie that I was hoping to see at that point in my life. As my gaming experience widened, I played a lot of D&D. I moved into Magic, played a handful of different games there. Early on in the Decipher days, I was around game stores when the Decipher CCG came out. It was something that I picked up a starter deck and I played, but I was really focused at the time with other things like Doomtown. I think Highlander was another game that I was playing during that period of time that was fairly popular. C23 was going on. There was Xena. There was Aliens vs. Predators. There was a Mech Warrior game. So there was a insanely wide CCG marketplace that sort of, obviously they were all birthed by Magic. And so I played a little bit of Decipher, but I didn't love Decipher. And Decipher had this, they had foils in their game, and they had super rare Lukes, and more importantly to me, Darth Vader, because I'm always playing the bad guy in this universe. And they were really expensive. And it became clear after playing with one of my friends who had a little bit bigger collection than I did that my deck wasn't really going to stand up to what theirs were. My Vader was not as good as his Vader and stuff. So I kind of left the Star Wars CCG itself alone and off to the side. I continued on my gaming path, and when I got to the store here, I started working here part-time around 2001. The first pack of Star Wars cards that I remember selling was Young Jedi, and it was Reflections. I know that was a thing that was sort of winding down, and the sun was setting on that, and the same thing. I think the last Jedi was out for Decipher as well. The sun was setting on that as well. So it was a situation where Star Wars was around at the time. I played a little bit of the D6 role-playing game from West End Games. I thought that was fun. It wasn't our primary thing. Again, I was a Doomtown player for the CCG, so I played a whole ton of Deadlands, and I played my sci-fi at the time was coming from either Cyberpunk or Shadowrun, so I didn't do a ton of licensed role-playing. It was just weird for me to get my head around the idea of playing inside a universe that sort of the story was already told for me. When I got to the store and I started getting more re-immersed in the games and started looking at all the different licenses that were around. There was a Harry Potter card game at the time. Pokemon was obviously huge and massive at that time. The role-playing version of the game that I was selling at that time was the Wizard of the Coast version. If anybody remembers out there, it was this square book that wasn't the normal standard size fit books. It was these square, they almost looked like what I would call a picture book. Very evocative covers, but it was not a role-playing game that I was playing at the time. We really didn't have much in the world of board games at that time. The license hadn't been licensed out. But the one thing that happened was, while I was in the store in July of 2004, Wizards came out with their collectible miniatures game for Star Wars. The first set for that came out. It was pre-painted. It was pre-assembled. I didn't have to build anything. I didn't have to paint anything. The first set really focused on the original movies and films. A lot of characters you knew. It was a really nice starter set, and looking back at the prices, it's kind of laughable now how cheap things were back then with pre-painted plastic and pre-assembled stuff, and the paint jobs were pretty good. At the time, I think we were kind of comparing that game to early Hero Clicks, where at early Hero Clicks you'd get, a Doctor Strange would have one of his eyes on his cheek and the other eye would be up on his forehead and stuff, and Wizards had put together these pre-painted stuff, and the pre-painted stuff looked beautiful. Really, really good. And the game was a lot of fun. You got to mix and match and do a whole bunch of stuff. It was scenario-based. Collectible game, so you had to buy a bunch of product, and you had to trade some plastics and stuff, but you were able to build a stormtrooper army if you wanted to, and they were point cost efficient for that and stuff. And they got into bigger sets, and the first big set had a giant Rancor in the box and some other stuff. And the game went on for 17 sets, so I was playing it. I played it steadily right along, whether it was sealed or whether it was constructed. Every set there was a pre-release for it, or they didn't really do a pre-release, but they had a release for it. So we got to sit down and sort of sort through the new set and figure out what things were what and what new characters were in. And they were combining a bunch of licenses at the time. There was some extended universe stuff, and there was the Nintendo 64 game was in there, and different things like that. So I didn't love everything that was there because I was a little more targeted with my Star Wars. Like I said, I didn't really enjoy the prequels all that much, or the characters that came out of that outside of maybe like Darth Maul in the first film. So I was a classic Star Wars guy. So as the sets sort of got along a little further and the characters became things that I didn't really know or didn't understand, it didn't really cause me to dive back into the license anymore. So after 17 sets, Wizards of the Coast calls it quit. The license obviously moved on because Fantasy Flight picked it up, but they got rid of all their pre-painted plastic collectible miniatures at the time. Dungeons & Dragons was doing pretty well, even though it came out in a non-collectible version towards the end. Axis and Allies miniatures were doing well, and so was the Star Wars miniatures. Talking to them internally, it just wasn't making enough money for them to continue to do the thing. So they moved on from that. And then shortly thereafter, Star Wars was licensed by Fantasy Flight, and then all of a sudden a bunch of these Fantasy Flight games were coming out with Star Wars attached to it. And the first one that really hit was XWing. XWing was a super, super successful miniatures game, pre-painted miniatures again. It just hit the market, and we were like 3 months behind because I remember my retail peers just exploding with it. They can't get more, they can't get more, they can't get more. And I was looking over at my shelf and I'm going, this stuff isn't moving. This isn't happening for us. Like, what are we doing? So it was a time, interestingly enough, where, we, for whatever reason, I didn't have anybody on staff that had that much care, and there wasn't a bunch of my local customers that were coming in saying, hey, really do something with this. So when I saw some of that happening, we created a demo day. We invited a bunch of people in, and sure enough, they came, and then very quickly the wall burst, and all of a sudden we had this giant X-Wing community that lasted for quite a while. X-Wing sort of put everything on the map for them when it came to that. So we had the benefit of selling X-Wing. X-Wing was a fun tactical game, pre-painted ships. It was self-select, so you didn't have to buy collectible product anymore. It was whatever you wanted. The level of detail for the painting was the best, still the best I've ever seen in the marketplace. I don't think anybody does pre-painted better than the X-Wing ships are for the game itself. And it was a fun game. Yeah, it's pretty tactical and stuff like that, but it could also be played as just a beer and pretzels game. Like, you don't need a lot of acumen when it comes to miniatures. It's a nice, really nice onboarding experience and stuff. And the game sold really well for us. And from there, the market now, they've since taken the license and they've created a whole bunch of different board games and things. So we sell Outer Rim, which is a fun game that, takes a subsection of the Star Wars world, which, was mostly focused on the smugglers and the bounty hunters and sort of does that thing. We sell Love Letter, Jabba's Palace, which is a super popular one. We sell a ton of it, mostly because it's actually one of the few that stays in stock pretty consistently. And there's a little bit more play to it than the original Love Letter. So there's the alliances versus Jabba's gang, and there's alternate win conditions and stuff. So there's a little bit more game in the box other than just a couple of cards. Along with that, we have some Star Wars plush. We sell a ton of different Lego kits. That Lego brand itself is humming despite what's happening in the pop culture world for it. They continue to make kits that are relevant to their fan base. They continue to come out with kits year after year after year. And it feels like for other Lego brands, we don't see that same sort of buy-in with consistency, right? So as an example, our Marvel stuff sort of ebbs and flows based on how popular the movie is or what the title is and things like that. And they really don't go back and reinvent it. And they don't do as good of a job sort of gardening what fans might want as as the Star Wars brand does. Harry Potter has its ups and downs. Obviously, there's a bunch of pushback on Harry Potter right now, so that line doesn't sell as well for us as it used to. And Star Wars just continues to crank with the Lego stuff. And we bring in a bunch of Hasbro things too. I haven't leaned into the action figure side of things because action figures is something that I would get into, but it feels like it's the sort of customer base where I need to have everything or I basically have nothing. It's not something that I really want to dabble with. Christmas time, I'll mess around with some of the Young Jedi Adventurers stuff just because it's, you know, fun stocking stuffer stuff, or it's, you know, low lift gifts. But in general, I don't have an action figure section. I did bring in they had a big lightsaber display that they had where you could actually hand select the lightsabers that you wanted. Those did really well for us. We got the display in, the display sold. I reordered some of the stuff. There's an Ahsoka one. There's a Yoda one. There's a whole bunch of different lightsabers that come into that. They're relatively inexpensive. They're fun little toys and stuff like that. So those did well for us as well. And the novels, I order most of my novels from Ingram. They have a pretty wide selection. The High Republic stuff has done pretty well for us. Release dates are more important for books now as I'm ordering more books and I'm selling more books. It gives you the opportunity that if a book isn't great, it doesn't have a whole bunch of reviews. So what I would say is, when it comes to books, sort of take two approaches to it. Either be the front of the pack where you're leading with pre-orders and things like that, or wait until, you know, Goodreads or something like that has a bunch of reviews on it and then just self-select based on quality. You just miss the initial sales bump if you decide to skip past that stuff. So now I'm a little more conscientious about what the calendar looks like, and I'll take a look at what the Star Wars books that are coming out for maybe the next quarter is, and I'll specifically make sure to try to hit those releases on the ones that I think are important or relevant to what's going on in maybe the TV show world too. So like obviously we did really well with the Ahsoka book when Ahsoka came out and stuff. So it's a bunch of things that the license allows it to do where they give you, we don't get surprised with Star Wars stuff where there's no lead time. So they let you know that Star Wars thing is coming. They give you a whole ton of lead time to be able to take a look at it and go from there. So the other game that we do well with too is Pandemic has a version that's Clone Wars. That also sells really well and it's popular. The area where I really wish there was just more attention to it, and I speak to Michael at Edge Studios a lot. So Asmodee Edge Studios, which is their role-playing branch, has the rights to produce all of the Star Wars role-playing product. There's an entire line of product that's there. They don't have any supply. Like, please hit print. Print the stuff. Give me the starters. Give me the core sets. If you don't want to go 40 deep on the Edge of Empire stuff, then don't. But like, give me bounty hunters and like Jabba, and give me, you know, a handful of the other stuff. Please just give me the core books, and please give me the starter sets and more of that, so that I can actually sell the role-playing game the way that it should be sold. That's sort of what the market looks like for us with Star Wars. It's certainly like if I ignore Pokemon as a license, it's certainly been the most profitable license for us long term, outside of the, you know, Magic being created by itself. There's not a ton of licenses that I have that I sell that sort of touches all four posts, which is board game, card game, role-playing game, and miniature game. And Star Wars does that, and it does it well, and the fandom is there, and the products are there, and the quality of products are pretty high as well. So I'm going to list 7 Star Wars games that we sell that sell well. I'm sort of going to do this in order based on how successful they've been for us, with some commentary in between the way that I normally do that. So number 7 is Star Wars Rebellion. Star Wars Rebellion is this big chunky boxed board game that's an area control board game where you're going through different times in the Star Wars universe and sort of making some different decisions. Initially it was sold as, you know, what if Han wasn't sold in carbonite, what else would happen? And there's some timing elements to the game that happen for that, but it's basically an area control game for 2 to 4 players. You got to pack a lunch though. It's 3 to 4 hours long, so, you know, setup's going to take you a little bit of time, and playing through the game is going to take you a little bit of time as well. But overall, pretty good, enjoyable experience if you have the time to be able to do that. Throw like Empire on in the background, play through the game. It's a really good time and a lot of fun. Number 6 is Shatterpoint. Ryan's probably going to send some pictures and slicing some pictures for me too of my Star Wars Shatterpoint gangs, which I have a number of them painted by a fantastic local painter. Skirmish level game. It's sold as like an episodic romp through the Star Wars universe, so it's like you're playing the cartoon. My personal experience with it is that it could have been a little more streamlined and a little more clean. I think there was some layers of the game that were put on it where if you're not familiar with miniatures games, it's a little bit harder to dive into. It takes you a little bit more time. The other thing that I think has really stymied the growth for this game is that in the card game space, there's a brand new set of card game product coming out every single week. You just can't avoid it. There's so many games on the market right now that if you're releasing a card game, it's not possible for you to not be on top of other people's release dates. Now, Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic try to dance around each other as best they can, but there's certainly been times when I've had, two of those three together on the same release weekend, and I cry all the way to the bank with my cash register money, but boy, facilitating it can be a little challenging sometimes. So we've got a ton of space in their play space, which hopefully we can do that. But one of the problems that Shatterpoint had is, for whatever reason, let me segue into saying that miniature games in general don't have that same sort of issue. There aren't 14, 15, 16 successful miniature games that really matter. There's one that really matters, and then there's all the rest of them. And for whatever reason, the decision was made by that team that they were going to launch on the exact same day that Warhammer was going to launch their 10th edition. So it sucked all the wind out of the sail of the release. They couldn't even own that weekend. Well, we're going to put it on the table, and it's going to do this, and it's going to do that. So whoever made that decision over there that they couldn't wait a weekend, or they couldn't go a weekend before that and give themselves the actual space so that stores could make a decision to bring that thing in, that was a poor choice. We didn't even have the time to be able to manage what was going on with that release and stuff. And I think what's happened is we've tried to play catch up after that. There's been a bunch of different boxes that have come out that are either not popular or will at some point be popular because of the new stuff, but some of the decisions that were made on some of the gangs, there could have been other things in the slot. Now, it's also felt like we've been drinking out of a fire hose with that game. So every month there's 2 new boxes that are coming out. You have to stay on board. So we're a year into this game, and I've got a full giant wall of stuff, and if somebody wants to engage with the game right now, it feels like they're just a giant amount behind, where they're really not. Honestly, if you're familiar with miniatures games and you've played skirmish level games and you've played things that are a little bit more complex, you can reach over there and you can grab something and you can go from there. There's also an issue that you have to sort of buy the starter set as well. If you don't care about any of the factions in there, it's not a great buy, like if you're not going to play any of those miniatures. So they don't have an essentials kit. There's nothing attached to it like that. So if you just wanted to go out and you wanted to pick up, one of my favorites, Cad Bane here. Right, like I couldn't take Cad Bane, who's awesome, and I couldn't run him out into a game without having to grab this monster starter set, and the price per model is a little bit high, and I've got all kinds of things to say. I could do an entire Shatterpoint show, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. I think there's a lot of opportunity in line. I think I'm encouraged by the stuff they've been releasing lately. The Bad Batch box came out, it crushed. They've got some other cool stuff coming. Number 5 is Armada. So all these Star Wars miniatures games that I mentioned are actually, they used to be Fantasy Flight, and they're Atomic Mass now. So the team at Atomic Mass are the ones that are running the ship for that. Armada's number 5, and these are sort of based on where our sales are. It's fantastic. It owns the epic space battleship game. It is a little bit more complex than it probably needs to be. It doesn't lend itself well to tournament play, just due to the nature of how long the rounds need to go. But as far as same thing, quality of miniature is fantastic. They could update some of the ships for sure to balance it out a little bit better. I think you could take a couple of layers of the rules off of it and make it a little bit more streamlined to make the game a little bit faster. But it's one of those things where there's no releases for it. The line itself continues to sell really well for me, despite there being some stock outages and things like that. So if you're interested in an epic scale ship battle game, there aren't a lot of options on the market. This one's really, really good. If you enjoy Star Wars, cool. It's a lot of fun to play. For the size and the scale of the game, it's actually relatively inexpensive to play for the quality of the models that you get. So feel free to take a look at that. Armada does really well for us. Number 4 is XWing. I spoke about that before. When XWing went from 1.0 to 2.0, 2.0 came out at the same exact weekend that Age of Sigmar came out. So what happened was, again, you had a player base that was really excited about tactical combat, and you gave them, about $150 buy-in to rebuy the products that you needed to get yourself to 2.0 from 1.0, or they could buy a $120 Age of Sigmar set and start a whole complete journey that's brand new. So again, timing, marketing, I don't know, lack of understanding on what's going on with the calendar, decisions were made there. And the worst part about it is the X-Wing 2.0 model versus the X-Wing 1.0 model. It's the best version of the game that's ever happened. The game itself is phenomenal. The proof is in the pudding when you look at any of the larger scale events. There's still plenty of people playing it. The sales at the local game store, though, have started to deteriorate. I think a large part of that is due to the fact that you've got a starter set that's 8 years old, right? You've got a whole bunch of shows that have come out where there's been no updated ships. There's been nothing that's happened with the game for years, or a one thing here and one thing there, or a reboxing of some starters and stuff. There's none of the ships from the newest stuff. Like the newest ship is Razor Crest, and that was, the newest actual ship from any of the licenses is Razor Crest, and that was a long time ago, right? There's a whole bunch of different ships and stuff that have come out from other shows that they could do something with. if they decided to. 3, Star Wars Legion. Star Wars Legion still outsells all of these other Star Wars games. Actually, if I combine the other 3 miniatures games, Star Wars Legions outsells that. It's an epic scale combat game, similar to what you would see with a 40K or any Games Workshop game that's on a large scale. You can play a whole ton of different armies. There's a bunch of different SKUs for the game. The game's pretty well balanced. It's a lot of fun to play. It's not overly complex. You don't need a book because all your stuff's on your character cards. The models are beautiful. It's priced reasonably well. 2 different starter sets, which are the ones behind me and over my shoulder there on your left-hand side, with the Vader starter, which is the more classic starter, and we got the Clone Wars there as well. I noticed we didn't get a Rey versus Kylo, but that's probably for the better. In general, really nice miniatures game. As far as like what you could ask for in a miniatures game in the Star Wars universe, I think the Fantasy Flight team sort of knocked it out of the park. It just feels like at this point it's sort of taken a back seat to what's going on with Shatterpoint for AMG. Number 2, best Star Wars game that we sell. Star Wars Deck Builder. 2-player game, deck builder, fantastic. Caleb Grace designed it. It's amazing. We sold over 100 units last year. It's still continued to trudge along. I hope there's more coming for it. I hope I get Deck Builder 2. Like, give me the Clone Wars of that and give me something else. I hope there's more coming. If you want to play more than 2 players, you just smash 2 sets together and off you go. Really well done. Price point's amazing. It's designed well. It's nice. It's not broken. It's not busted. It's got a lot of touch points that you've seen if you're familiar with Snap and different things like that. That game's awesome. I've owned 6 copies of it myself, because every time I have somebody that comes into town and we play the game, I end up inevitably giving it to them. They take it home and I get another copy. Number 1 Star Wars game right now for us, from a profit standpoint, from an excitement and enthusiasm, from play space, from a cash register, is Star Wars Unlimited. So Star Wars Unlimited came in. There wasn't a lot of hype. There wasn't a lot of fanfare. There wasn't a lot of retail buy-in. There was what they thought was a year's worth of supply that lasted them less than a month. There's not much more to say about Star Wars Unlimited than they did their job too well. And all of us agreed, because there's so many of us that are playing the game now. The events that are happening nationwide that are still going with the money events and different things like that, the attendance on those have been pretty significant. Our weekly events have continued to climb. Our draft events have done really well. Our constructed events have done really well. We haven't really done sealed outside of the pre-release and stuff. I feel like draft is sort of the direction that we're gonna continue to go in. If you're interested in any of those games that I mentioned at all, they're all being taught this Saturday at the store, so we start pretty early. We're going to be doing Star Wars games throughout the day on May the 4th. If you look around social media, you can't not see an advertisement from a game store that's doing something for May the 4th. It's really nice that it happens to be on a Saturday this year, because there's very few holidays for us as nerds and game store owners where we can really show the love for a certain product line. So I think, I'll have to talk to somebody and we'll have to see if May the 4th can just be locked in on a Saturday going forward, because it's super convenient for us. It's really good for marketing for them. I would assume or hope that Lucas will announce some cool things for over the weekend too, with regard to what they're doing with some of the new stuff. I like the look of the Acolyte, and I like the look of where they're headed with some of their other stuff. It'll be interesting to get another season of Andor, which is personally my favorite Star Wars thing that's come out in years. So yeah, if you want, feel free to stop on by on Saturday. We're going to be here doing all kinds of different things for Star Wars. You can check our event calendar for that. The other thing that we have going on this weekend too is we have the Keyforge Vault Tour. So Ghost Galaxy has decided to use us as a space to host their Keyforge Vault Tour. So we've got the folks from Ghost Galaxy coming in. We'll have exclusive merchandise to sell. We'll have events the entire weekend. They start kicking off on Friday. Their setup is on Thursday. They'll be streaming. They'll be doing all their stuff. They'll have a ton of product. They'll have a bunch of exclusive stuff that you can only get at the Vault Tours themselves. And I think next week what we're going to do is we're going to talk about events. There was a pretty significant post about events and monetizing events and things like that, and how you go about doing that came up on my friend Gary Ray's page the other day, and there was some commentary in there that I agreed with and disagreed with, and somebody asked if I spent enough time in my business understanding the actual costs of what it's like to have my event space, whether or not I calculated my square footage cost and the additional costs that go into that. So rather than respond to that post, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an entire episode and explain exactly how I break down making the decision to have a game store that has a play space that seats 300 card players, and go from there. So hopefully everybody tunes in next week, same time. We're going to go 1:30 live for that. I'll do some AMA after this. We're going to keep it tight though. I got a 3 o'clock meeting today. So thanks everybody.